venture to say off the bat, this is a pretty smart group of people, very distinguished. But have you ever wondered how deluded you are? We are, all of us. Bear with me. For example, have you ever thought about when you were young being a professional athlete? I know Vlad has. So about 26%, so 1 in 4 of high school, parents of high school athletes hope their kids will go on to play professional sports. They believe that they could make it. But what are the real odds of making it? Well, ice hockey has the best odds. It's 1 in 600. Then you go to football, 1 in 4,200. How about soccer? 1 in 5,800. For perspective, people have about 1 in 113 chance of dying in a car crash. So you can see just how unbelievably hard it is to make the transition. And we can also see that most parents are quite deluded to their thoughts about their kids, which is natural, I guess. Plato quoted his mentor Socrates as saying, "I know only one thing, and that's that I know nothing." And Socrates was said to be so wise precisely because he realized the limit to his knowledge. And it was this that Plato said was the start of wisdom. In his book, The Black Swan, one of my personal heroes, Nassim Taleb, he talks about risk, primarily in the financial markets. And his title, The Black Swan, it comes from the old European assumption that because they'd only noticed that swans were white, all swans were therefore white. And then, in 1697, Dutch explorers were in Australia, where it sounds like you're from, and they saw this beautiful black swan, and they were blown away. They couldn't believe that a swan might actually not be white. So, no amount of white swans is enough to prove that every swan is actually white. The term black swan, therefore, came to symbolize the idea of a perceived impossibility might later be disproven. In layman's terms, we don't know what we don't know. Nassim Taleb goes on to describe the relationship between books and knowledge. He's quite the philosopher, even though he comes from a finance background. And he talked about a legendary Italian writer, Herbert Eco, who was said to have 30,000 books in his personal library. And Eco talked about 2 different people that came and they saw his books. The first said, "Wow, Professor Eco, what an amazing library you have. How many of these have you actually read?" But the second, a much smaller minority, got the point. A private library is not just an ego-boosting appendage. It's a research tool. You'll accumulate more books as you age, and the growing number of unread books will look back at you menacingly. And indeed, the more you know, the larger the rows of unread books. Taleb calls this his anti-library. So the anti-library represents an inkling of what we don't know, or what Socrates would say is the start of wisdom. Now you might all be thinking, that's great, but what has the anti-library got to do with me? Well, it impacts you hugely, because right now in 2019, we have incredible tribalism. And primarily it's religious and political extremism, but in general we see tribalism everywhere. All extremists, by very definition, represent society's biggest danger. Do you think the Muslim extremists that flew into the Twin Towers doubted there were 7 virgins waiting for them when they died? Do you think Trump thinks he could have been a professional athlete? With his ego, of course he does. But he's probably overstating his chances about 1 in 5,000. And lastly, do you think Hillary ever takes a minute to ponder that maybe Bernie was the better man for the job? Of course she doesn't, with her ego. And that's the problem we're in today. Leaders and influencers with no anti-libraries. People more arrogant than Socrates. They don't know what they don't know. People who believe that all swans are white just because they've never seen a black swan. So what is the solution? If humanity is to have any hope for the future, the solution is to take a scientific approach. Question everything, even your own previous assumptions and viewpoints. Don't be marred by the hubris that we all tend to fall into sometimes, and stay constantly learning. Be like Socrates. Know what you don't know. I know only one thing, That's the end of nothing. Thank you.